A hard border results from Brexit, or in the case of a rushed border poll. The only question in both scenarios, according to the report, would be the scale of the violence. The research was conducted by Fianna Fáil Senator Mark Daly in conjunction with UNESCO Chairs, Professor Pat Dolan and Professor Mark Brennan. It refers to what it calls the memory of the agreement generation, those born just before or since the Good Friday Agreement was signed, and who have no first-hand knowledge of the horrors of the conflict and may have romanticised their sense of what the troubles involved. Well, Senator Mark Daly is with us here in the studio. Very good morning to you. Thanks for coming into us, Mark Daly. It's a big claim to say that something is inevitable. What's the basis for it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the basis initially was when I compiled the report for the Good Friday Agreement Implementation Committee in 2017 on Brexit and the future of Ireland, uniting Ireland and its people in peace and prosperity. One of the recommendations adopted by all the members of the committee was how would we protect the peace in advance of a referendum on a united Ireland. But of course, since then, the issue of a hard border coming back. So the remit of that research that I was conducting with Professor Brennan from UNESCO and Professor Pat Dolan was about, well, what should we do in the event of a return to hard border? What would be the consequences? I also worked with Michael Ortiz, who was the first person appointed by the United States State Department on the area of countering violent extremism, as in how do you prevent people being radicalised. He would have worked with the French government, the Belgian government and the Kenyan government.
So why have you concluded then, why does this report conclude that a return to the hard border would become a magnet, a catalyst for a return to violence?
What they have discovered is this absence of memory of harm in the agreement generation, that generation born just before or since the Good Friday Agreement, and a lot of them who are living in the most disadvantaged loyalist and Republican areas are being, to use a term from a different conflict, radicalised, because they have been given this romanticised view. And we have seen as well the monitoring report last year saying a likely return to violence. Bertie Ahern said that in the event of infrastructure going back up, you wouldn't have to wait for the terrorists to take it down, that the people would take it down. But we have seen Angela Merkel now talking about the fact that in the event of a hard border, Ireland would have to protect the customs union, and therefore there is no technological solutions anywhere in the world available that wouldn't require infrastructure to do that.
So it's not just the presence of infrastructure on the border, it's also what's happening, you're saying, within some of these communities in Northern Ireland.
And we've seen this in the loyalist communities, and this is during the flags protest, again, the radicalisation of the generation that never knew the troubles, don't know the horrors of the troubles. And during that flags protest in 2012-13, you had banners saying, "We will not be the generation to fail Ulster." So any rush border poll would mobilise those people. And what you have is paramilitary leaders who in some instances during the day are community leaders, and then at night our paramilitary leaders are actually radicalising young people and mobilising them for their own ends. They're going to exploit them.
To what extent, though, would a restoration of power sharing at Stormont, a filling of that political vacuum, act as a counter to that, even in circumstances where there was some element of a hard border?
With the time available, if the hard border comes back in 6 weeks' time, and as I said, it's not me coming to the conclusion, it's two UNESCO World Chairs coming to the conclusion saying that we will return to that hard border does not give the time and space that is needed in order to create a cross-community effort. That has been done to some degree over the last 20 years, but hasn't been done on the scale that is required in order to maintain the peace.
It's not just a hard border, you say, that poses a risk of return to violence. It's also a border poll, which of course we know
a rushed border poll would be another catalyst, and that is the lesson of Brexit. And the lesson of Brexit is policy neglect seldom goes unpunished, and there was no policy after the referendum. And the lesson of Brexit is quite clear in that regard, is you do not hold a referendum and then try and figure out the future. What you have to do is long-term engagement with all those communities, even those who will never support the issue of a united Ireland, and you tell them about the vision for the future that you would like to see for a new Ireland, an agreed Ireland, a different Ireland, not the nightmare that unionists would think of, or the dream that Republicans may have had, but in fact a different view. But nobody is articulating that view, and that fear is being exploited in the loyalist community by paramilitary leaders to keep going their drug and criminal empire. But also, as we saw in Derry, a quite clear example that what is happening to young people, even during the summer, where a Protestant enclave in Derry was attacked by kids who never knew the troubles, hoping that the police would arrive. And if the infrastructure comes back, according to these UNESCO World Chairs, that what we're talking about is the scale of violence we will return to.
All right, there we leave it, Senator.